In 1921, Carl Jung uncovered something that neuroscience has only now confirmed. There exists a type of person who simply vanishes, without warning, without explanation, without farewell, and when asked where they went, no one knows the answer. Because this person told no one. Dr. K. Tai's laboratory at Stanford University has identified the exact neurons that fire when this type of person feels the need to disappear. And what they've discovered will completely change how you understand this behavior. If you've ever vanished from everyone's life without a word, or if you know someone who does, the next few minutes will reveal what really happens in these people's brains, and why this isn't weakness, isn't escape, isn't cowardice. It's something much deeper that conventional psychology has never wanted to admit. You've probably done it, or felt the overwhelming urge to do it. That moment when everything feels like too much. The messages that just keep coming. The expectations that never stop growing. The people who want pieces of you that you no longer have to give. And suddenly, the only solution that makes sense is to disappear. Jung called this a necessary retreat to the inner world. Andrew Huberman identified the exact neurological mechanism. And what both discovered reveals that people who disappear without warning share a brain characteristic that only 3% of the population possesses. But before I tell you what that characteristic is, I need you to understand something that goes against everything you've been taught about social behavior. Society has told you that disappearing is wrong, that it's a lack of consideration, that it's immaturity, that responsible people warn, explain, ask permission. But 2024 neuroscience has proven that, for certain brain types, disappearing isn't a choice, it's a biological necessity. Dr. K. Tai spent years studying what she calls solitude neurons in the dorsal raphe nucleus. These neurons are dopaminergic, but with a peculiarity. In normal people, they fire when there's a lack of social connection, creating discomfort that pushes the person back into the group. But in about 3% of the population, these neurons function in reverse. They fire when there's an excess of connection, and the discomfort they create only alleviates with isolation. Jung described this phenomenon 70 years before neuroscience confirmed it. In his book, Psychological Types, from 1921, he mapped a personality type he called the intuitive introvert. According to Jung, this person lives primarily in the inner world. The external world exists, but as something secondary, almost as an interference. And when this external world becomes too intense, the only way to maintain sanity is to withdraw completely. Do you remember that time you disappeared and everyone got worried? You weren't angry when you weren't depressed. You weren't punishing anyone. You simply needed to stop existing for others. For a while. And that made you finally able to breathe. This isn't a defect. It's neurology. Andrew Huberman explained in November of 2025 that there is something called social homeostasis. Just as your body has an equilibrium point for temperature, for glucose, for sleep, your brain has an equilibrium point for social interaction. And this point varies dramatically from person to person. For some people, the equilibrium point requires constant contact. These people panic when they're alone for even a few hours. Their brain interprets solitude as a survival threat. The solitude neurons fire intensely, creating a discomfort that only alleviates with connection. But for other people, the equilibrium point is at the opposite extreme. Constant contact is what triggers the alarm. The presence of too many people for too long drains something fundamental, and the brain, trying to protect this precious resource, starts creating an urgency to escape. These people disappear because their brain is trying to save them. Jung went deeper. He observed that the intuitive introvert has a peculiar relationship with time. For this person, social time passes differently. 1 hour in a group can feel like an entire day. A week without solitude can cause a sensation of having lived months, and when the accumulation reaches a limit, the system simply collapses and requires a reset. The reset is the disappearance. But here is what Huberman discovered that changes everything. Prolonged isolation physically alters the brain structure. Researchers at the University of Buffalo published in 2024 in Nature Neuroscience that periods of isolation modify the myelination of the prefrontal cortex. Myelin is the insulator of neurons. It determines the speed with which information travels through the brain. In people who isolate themselves regularly, the myelin of the prefrontal cortex develops differently. This creates patterns of cognitive processing that don't exist in people who never experience deep solitude. And these patterns, once formed, cause the brain to need isolation to function optimally. It's a cycle. You disappear because you need to. The isolation changes your brain. Your modified brain starts needing more isolation, and you disappear again. Jung called this the individuation spiral, the process by which a person becomes who they really are, separating themselves from the collective, according to him. This process isn't optional for certain souls, it's destiny. Hold on. Because what I'm about to reveal about why you can't warn people before disappearing will explain a lot. There's a neurological reason why people who disappear rarely warn others. And it's not a lack of consideration. It's that warning would require a type of cognitive processing that, at the moment of collapse, simply isn't available. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is responsible for planning and complex social communication. Warning that you're going to disappear is an act of complex social communication. You would need to explain something that even you don't understand. You would need to deal with reactions that you don't have the energy to process. You would need to negotiate your need with the expectations of others. When the system reaches the point of collapse, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is the first area to lose functionality. It's as if the brain is saying, social communication is a luxury now. Survival is the priority. What remains is the pure impulse. Disappear, vanish, stop existing for the external world. And the brain executes this in the most efficient way possible, which means, without warning anyone. Jung described this moment as the descent into the underworld. The moment when consciousness needs to dive into the depths of the unconscious to rebuild itself. And in this dive, all social obligations become irrelevant. Not because the person doesn't care, but because the brain has entered survival mode. Do you remember how you felt when you came back from your last disappearance? That strange sensation that the world kept spinning without you. And that somehow that was liberating because it proved you're not as indispensable as you thought. And that maybe, just maybe, you can give yourself permission to vanish again when you need to. That's your brain showing you that disappearing works. Andrew Huberman explained that there's a phenomenon called neural consolidation, when you remove all external stimuli. The brain uses that quiet to reorganize information. Memories are processed. Neural connections are strengthened or pruned. Thought patterns are reconstructed. People who never disappear never give their brain that opportunity for deep maintenance. And over time, that creates a buildup. Unprocessed information, unintegrated emotions, obsolete patterns that keep running because there's never been time to update them. People who disappear regularly keep their brains functioning optimally, not despite the disappearances, because of them. Carl Jung predicted this when he wrote that the introvert who resists their nature develops neuroses. The psychic system needs a necessary retreat to the inner world, and when that return is denied, symptoms appear: anxiety, depression, unexplained outbursts, chronic fatigue. The body starts to get sick because the soul isn't able to breathe. But here's the part no one talks about. There's a price to disappear, and people who do it regularly pay that price. Relationships suffer. People start to stop trusting you. Professional opportunities are lost because you weren't there when they happened. A reputation for being unreliable forms. And over time, you can end up more alone than you'd like. Not by choice, but by consequence. Jung called this the introvert's shadow. The person who needs to vanish to survive pays the social price of that behavior. And that price can create wounds that further fuel the need to vanish. An individuation spiral that, without awareness, can become destructive. Huberman offers a practical perspective. According to him, the problem isn't disappearing. The problem is disappearing in an uncontrolled way. When collapse is what determines when you vanish, you're always reacting, always putting out fires, always reaching the limit, before allowing yourself a break. The solution, according to neuroscience, is strategic disappearance, planning periods of isolation, before the brain reaches collapse, informing important people that you'll be unavailable, not because you owe them explanations, but because it reduces the stress of the return, creating isolation rituals that the brain can anticipate and prepare for. Jung called this conscious descent instead of being dragged into the underworld. You choose to descend. Instead of being swallowed by the need to vanish, you manage that need. The result is the same regenerative isolation, but without the collateral destruction. Do you remember that time you gave people a heads up before disappearing and it didn't work? You explained that you needed some time, and even so, people didn't understand. They sent messages, they called, they showed up at your apartment, and what was supposed to be rest became just another battle. That happens because most people don't understand what I'm explaining to you now. For them, solitude is a problem, isolation is an escape, disappearing is rejection. They don't have the neurology that you have, they don't feel what you feel, and that's why they interpret your behavior through their parameters. Jung said that the introvert is misunderstood because they speak a language that most people can't decode. Their needs seem strange, their behaviors seem wrong, and any attempt to explain meets walls of incomprehension. The solution isn't to stop disappearing. It's to choose carefully who remains in your life. People who understand that your vanishing isn't abandonment. People who respect that your absence is a need, not a whim. People who are there when you return, without demands, without drama, without guilt. These people exist, and they disappear too. There's an invisible community of people who vanish. They don't meet in support groups. They don't create introvert clubs, because meeting would require exactly the type of interaction that they're avoiding, but they recognize each other when they cross paths, in the eyes, in the silent relief of not needing to explain, in the mutual understanding that dispenses with words. If you're watching this, you're probably one of them. And what I'm going to tell you now is for you specifically. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You're not avoiding life. You're living life in a way that most can't comprehend. Your brain works differently. Your needs are different, and trying to force yourself to be like others will only create more damage. Jung wrote that trying to cure introversion is like trying to cure height. You can pretend to be shorter, you can slouch, you can hide, but your structure remains the same, and the energy spent pretending is energy stolen from living. Huberman said something similar when he explained that trying to change your social homeostasis point is possible, but extremely costly. The brain resists, the body gets sick, the mind collapses, and in the end, the person ends up returning to their original equilibrium point. But now, with the additional trauma of the attempted change, the wisdom isn't in changing who you are, it's in accepting who you are, and building a life that respects that. If you need to disappear, disappear. If you need days of solitude, take those days. If you need to stop existing to the world for a while, stop. Not because it's escape, but because it's maintenance, because it's survival, because it's who you are. And when you return, you'll return stronger, clearer, more you, and the people who matter will be there. And those who aren't, maybe never truly belonged in your life. Now I need to reveal something that Jung never officially published. In his private writings, he described a phenomenon that he observed repeatedly in patients who disappeared. He called it the preparation of the self. According to Jung, before major internal transformations, the unconscious prepares the ground, and one of the ways this preparation happens is by creating the irresistible need for isolation. The self, which is the center of the total psyche, needs silence to do its work. And it achieves that silence by forcing the person to move away from everything. That means that when you feel the need to vanish, it may not just be tiredness. It could be that something big is preparing inside you, a transformation, a revelation, a rebirth, and the isolation is the necessary incubation for that to happen. Huberman indirectly validated this when he explained that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to remodel itself, occurs most intensely in states of low external stimulation. The brain needs quiet to rebuild itself, and some reconstructions are so profound that they demand weeks or even months of quiet. So if you're feeling that pressure to disappear right now in your life, pay attention. Your brain might be trying to tell you something. Your subconscious may be preparing something, and to resist could interrupt a process that needs to happen. The question isn't whether you should disappear. The question is, for how long, and how to ensure the external world doesn't completely collapse while you're gone. There are ways to disappear without destroying your life. There are ways to vanish that preserve important relationships. There are ways to be absent that strengthen, rather than weaken, your position. And that's what people who disappear successfully have learned to do. First, they identify the people who need to know. Not everyone. Just the people who will genuinely worry, and whose worry will create practical problems. Aging parents, romantic partners, work supervisors. These individuals receive minimal communication. I will be unavailable for X amount of time. I am okay. I will be back. No explanations, no justifications, no negotiations, just information. Second, they create automatic systems, automatic email replies, out-of-office messages on messaging apps, scheduled payments. The world continues to function without requiring your active presence. Third, they define a time limit, not indefinite, a return date, even if flexible. This prevents the disappearance from becoming a permanent escape, and it gives the brain a horizon to work towards. Fourth, they create return rituals, ways to reintegrate into the external world gradually, because returning from a deep immersion directly into the full intensity can cause shock, and that shock can create the need to disappear again immediately. People who disappear wisely build a life that accommodates their nature. They choose careers that allow flexibility. They cultivate relationships with people who understand. They create physical spaces where they can isolate themselves without interruption. And they stop feeling guilty for being who they are. If you felt something stir within you while watching this, if you recognized yourself in these words, if you finally understood something you've always sensed but could never articulate, I need to ask something of you. YouTube has that golden heart down there, the super thanks. It's not about the money. It's about something deeper that Andrew Huberman explained when talking about neural reciprocity. When you make a gesture of recognition, your brain registers that moment as significant, and that strengthens the connection we just created. Every super thanks this video receives finances, more research, more time to prepare content like this, more ability to reveal what Carl Jung and Andrew Huberman discovered. But that most creators don't have the patience or depth to explain. You're not just supporting a video. You're saying, continue revealing what helps us understand who we are. And that matters, because people like you, people who disappear, are often the least seen. You're not there to receive attention. You're not there to ask for support. You're somewhere, alone, trying to rebuild yourselves. And I want you to know that someone sees you, someone understands, and someone is creating content for you now. Before I finish, I need to tell you about the phenomenon that Jung called the return. Every person who disappears eventually returns, even those who think that this time they won't. The return is inevitable. Because we are social beings, even the most introverted among us. Solitude regenerates, but it doesn't replace connection permanently. What matters is how you return. You can return ashamed, apologizing for having disappeared, explaining yourself excessively, promising it won't happen again. And that kind of return guarantees that you'll feel guilty the next time you need to disappear. And the guilt will delay the disappearance until a breakdown is inevitable, or you can return with sovereignty, recognizing that you disappeared because you needed to, without excessive apologies, which is without impossible promises, simply saying, I needed some time, and now I'm back. People who understand you will accept that. People who don't understand will be offended, and their reaction will show you who belongs in your life. Carl Jung said that the introvert who apologizes for their nature is betraying themselves. You owe no apologies for needing what you need. You owe only enough communication to avoid unnecessary harm. Nothing more. Andrew Huberman added that how you return affects your brain. If you return with shame, your brain associates isolation with negative emotion. And the next time, it will resist disappearing, even when it's necessary. But if you return with neutrality, or even pride, your brain learns that disappearing is safe. And that makes future disappearances easier and less traumatic. The goal is to reach a point where disappearing is as normal as sleeping, something you do regularly, something that the people in your life expect and respect, something that causes no drama, no guilt, no crisis. That's possible, but it requires you to stop treating yourself as a problem. You are not a problem. You are a solution. You found a way to stay healthy in a world that constantly demands more than most brains can give. You've developed a survival strategy that works. And now, with the understanding that this video has given you, you can refine that strategy, disappear when you need to, return when you're ready, and build a life that honors who you really are. Carl Jung finished Psychological Types with a reflection on how different types of people will never fully understand each other. The extrovert will see the introvert as IL. The introvert will see the extrovert as superficial. And both will be wrong, because neither type is better or worse, just different. The world needs people who disappear. It needs people who dive deep. It needs people who return with insights that only deep silence can reveal. You are one of those people, and now you know it. If you've ever disappeared without warning, write in the comments how long you were gone, days, weeks, and months. Let's see how many of us share this pattern, because every comment is proof that you're not alone in this. And sometimes, knowing that others understand is all we need to keep going.